Hey buddy, are you tired of being scared or frightened in your horror movies? Is the sense of dread and fear just too much for your fragile little mind to handle? Well, have I got something for you, 2010's horror movies! See, in 2010 horror movies, we've taken out all sense of fear and dread, instead for just flashing a JPEG at you with scary loud noises, because that's scary. Who cares about likable characters or relatable cool villains? In 2010's horror movies, we have cute-looking babysitters, little kids, and doggies. And you don't want them to die because there's hot girls, little kids, and doggies. And if you want them to die, you're a horrible person. Who needs cool, complex horror villains? We have generic demon number 457. We have scary board games. And innocent party games with demon possessions thrown into them. But don't take my word for it. Listen to this testimony from a satisfied customer.
I always thought horror movies were just too scary for me. All that writing, tension, and suspense, it got really, really old. But now with 2010 horror movies, I don't have to worry about any of that. Now I can just watch these films in silent grief and boredom.
But wait, there's more. Order now and we'll throw in an awful twist ending. It's an awful twist ending that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but because it's a twist, you're gonna buy it and be shocked. And for no additional charge, I'll throw in awful sequel baiting, spin-offs and sequels galore with a cinematic universe. We're gonna milk your favorite franchise dry whether you want it or not. So don't miss out on this offer. Order a 2010's horror movie today.
Hi, I'd like to order some 2010 horror movies. No, I hate being scared shitless.
The horror film genre is one of the most unique and diverse in all of film. There are so many different ways to scare people in movies. It's not just monsters or demons or creepy crawlies. You can do anything now with psychological horror, there's sci-fi horror, there's mystery horror, there's now even horror comedies. There's so much now you can do with horror films. And the way they've been done in the past is extremely well done and unique. But for the most part, in the 2010s, the past decade was not very good for horror films. And the horror films I've seen in 2020 so far, at least the ones I saw in theaters, they were pretty bad too. So here's the thing. In the 2010s, we had a lot of groundbreaking movies. I'll admit, the 2010s, some people say Hollywood may be entering a new golden age, and while that can be up for debate, there's no denying we got some films that will define generations in the 2010s. But I could argue very, very few of them were horror movies. See, here's the thing. In the 70s, 80s, maybe 90s, maybe 60s too, we had a lot of groundbreaking horror films. Films like Alien, Halloween, Evil Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, The Exorcist. We had films that defined horror genres. Films that were landmarks. In the 2010s, I'm really struggling to think of films that were like that. I could say The Conjuring, maybe Get Out for horror comedies. Well, it had a comedic edge to it. Hereditary, maybe? That's really it. The majority of the 2010s horror movies were just... I'm sorry, it might just be my opinion, I just did not like a majority of the 2010s horror films. To me, they were really sloppy, not very well done, they just seemed to have one purpose in mind, and... Here, look, I'm just gonna level with you guys. I am a big fan of the horror genre, but mostly old horror movies. I cannot watch modern horror films. To me, they're literally all the exact same. And I know that it's like once you've seen one kind of horror film, it can be pretty easy to predict cliches, but here's the thing. I mean the exact same. It feels like companies are literally just giving away scripts just with a different title slapped on. Look no further than the Conjuring universe, but we'll get to that in a bit. So this is why I call 2010s the horror film Wasteland. I could name more bad 2010 horror movies than good ones, and I've looked through my worst lists over the past 5 or 6 years. I found the majority of the worst films on my lists were horror films. A few bad thrillers and action films too, but I could argue action films actually got way better in the 2010s. We had a few bad action movies, but I could argue we got some great action landmarks in the 2010s. Way more than horror anyway. So why do I think the 2010s were really terrible for horror? Well, as I kind of covered in my sketch, let's go over 4 big reasons I've noticed. The first big reason I noticed is a lack of real scares. They have seemed to rely on jump scares and flashing scary imagery with loud, ear-piercing music. That may work once or twice, but the 3rd, 4th, or 5th time, you're desensitized to it. And here's the thing, it gets worse with false scares, because then when it's supposed to be just a jump scare, like those things where you see someone creeping through the house, and you know that nothing scary is going to happen because you're like 15 minutes into the movie and it's way too early for that, and then one of their friends just jumps them out and shouts boo, and like a loud, big, ear-piercing sound effect goes through. See, here's the thing, I can agree with the scare every 10-minute rule in horror films. In my opinion, and this is going to sound weird, big scares should really be a minimum. And by real scares, I mean, the thing you're supposed to be frightened of. There's a reason Alien is my favorite horror movie. And believe it or not, it is not because of the alien itself. Yeah, I love the xenomorph. I love that thing. And if you've ever played Alien Isolation, you know just how terrifying that thing can be. But the thing is, what makes that film scary is not the alien itself. It's the atmosphere, the fear, the dread, the sense of hopelessness. That's what makes Alien so frightening. The claustrophobic, tense feeling of being trapped in space with a killer monster you cannot defeat. That is extremely terrifying, because in my old channel, YouTube Life, in my Alien review, I stated the only way that they could really escape was to eject themselves into space and just hope to God someone would pick them up. That is extremely terrifying. Almost, you could argue, more terrifying than the monster trying to kill them. And that's the thing. I hope that people realize that a horror film's scares aren't just measured by how many times you jumped in your seat or how many times you may have screamed. You should be feeling tense through the whole film. A horror film is doing its job if you're sitting on pins and needles, if your stomach turns, if you're just gripping the seat tight and you have no idea what's going to come next. But when you're just sitting around waiting for jump scares, then it kind of drains all atmosphere and dread. Because once the jump scare is over, guess what? Then you're not scared anymore and you kind of just relax. When in a horror film, a jump scare shouldn't just be the end of the scare. Then you should not be allowed to relax. Keep the tension up. Really good horror films never give its audience a chance to breathe. That's one thing I do appreciate about Midsommar and Hereditary. I was intense and on pins and needles through the entire film. I never once felt a chance to breathe, and that's one thing I liked about those films. In modern day horror films, I know exactly when things are going to happen. You know what's going to happen. All sound drains out, the place goes quiet, maybe the camera pans away to show something, then back to the character, and then boo, big jump scare. And that ruins all tension. It's a lack of real horror. Real horror is not making you jump in your seat and then scream because a loud noise happened. No, real horror is not just in what you see, but what you don't see. Sometimes the imagination can be more terrifying than anything you could put on screen. Some of the best horror films in existence leave it up to the audience to fill in what happened. They leave it up to the audience to decide the fate of a certain character, or what possible terrifying thing could have occurred, because the mind and the imagination can be so much more terrifying. So that's a big first reason. There's a lack of real scares. It's just flash JPEG of scary face something, loud music, loud noise, boo. See, that in itself should not be a real scare. That should be either an introduction or a huge, big climax from the atmosphere we've been getting, not the scare itself. If that's all you got, then your tension will drain extremely quickly, which leads to the second problem, a lack of tension. If there's one thing horror films thrive on, it's atmosphere. They thrive on making you feel tense through the entire runtime. Atmosphere must be right on point in a horror film. If there is no sense of dread or fear, then you have no chance to scare anyone in your movie. That's something that the old slasher films nailed to a T. It wasn't just Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger or Leatherface that scared us. It was the atmosphere that we were trapped in. John Carpenter in Halloween brilliantly nailed down to the camera movements, the very slow-moving editing, Michael Myers' excellent breathing with the sound mixing of the theme. He nailed this atmosphere of an idea that these people are never safe. There is constantly someone watching them, and at any second it could all be over, and they're powerless to stop it. When nowadays in modern horror movies, all you know is, okay, look, your solution is simple. Just burn the stupid doll. Just don't read the book. Don't recite this stupid little riddle. Don't say this thing. Don't look at that thing. Don't touch this thing, and you'll be okay. When it's that easy of an out, tension drains. Because now you know, this all could have been avoided if you had just not done that. When in Halloween, there really is no way out of them for it. They just have to hope they can survive the night. In Nightmare on Elm Street, how were they supposed to escape? Freddy Krueger haunts them in their dreams. The only way they can try to beat him is to constantly stay awake. But that drains their bodies. That's also endangering within itself. It's not healthy. It hurts them. The insomnia gets to them. And Freddy Krueger eventually finds a way to kill them. That's what makes it terrifying. When you feel like there's no easy solution, all you can do is just survive. But in most horror movies, especially in modern day horror films, if you had not just said the stupid nursery rhyme or read the book out loud, guess what? You would have been okay. Nothing would have happened. But no, you were stupid and curious because you needed plot to happen. That is what happens when you lack tension. Because when there's the easy out, or you know that all this happened because some idiot read a book or said a nursery rhyme or played a board game, because apparently board games are scary now, then you know that all tension is completely gone, because now you know, okay, they're just going to have to do this and everything will be okay. And now let's lead to the third problem, a lack of characters. See, I can agree. Some of the old horror films didn't have the most memorable characters. Like, I don't remember anyone from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A majority of the Halloween characters are forgettable. The only real two protagonists you remember are Laurie Strode and Michael Loomis. And Dr. Loomis, my bad. And that's just because, Dr. Loomis is the one hunting Michael, and Laurie Strode is Michael's main target. Friday the 13th, the only real memorable character, honestly, I remember from that entire franchise, is Tommy Jarvis. And that's just because he's the guy who went to kill Jason. Nightmare on Elm Street, not a ton of memorable characters there. Granted, Alien did have Ripley, and Aliens had more memorable characters, though that's more of an action film. But modern day horror films, they're all just the same, like I said in the little sketch I did. They're all just cute, hot girls to get the teen guys in the seats, little kids that you don't want to die because you'll feel bad because it's little kids, and dogs because everyone loves dogs. And you don't want to see a dog die. And I'm not going to lie, whenever I see a bad horror movie with a dog, all I think is, I just want to see the dog get through this. Everyone else can die. When you don't care about your characters, then that also ruins the scares for you. You're like, cool, that's scary. Why am I supposed to be scared? If you're constantly asking why throughout the whole film and you're not engrossed in it, then what's the point? Then you just find yourself waiting for jump scares to run out, for the scary music to die down, and then the movie ends. You need to have at least something to your characters that makes them likable. Well, apparently horror writers have failed to understand cliches should help us relate to characters. Cliches should not be your characters. When cliches are your characters, they become less relatable. Look, cliches can actually help, believe it or not. Cliches can help us relate to characters a bit more because guess what? We all have our own little cliche. We all have something we can relate to, whether it be the nerd, the jock, maybe the person who had a bad childhood, maybe the person who just wants to have a good life, maybe the person who's going through a rough patch in a relationship or a friendship. We all can relate to that in some way, but that should not be their only thing. When you just memorize, oh, that's the jock, that's the dweeb, that's the hot girl, that's the idiot, then guess what? Then they're not characters. You're like, oh, jock died. Oh, hot girl died. Oh, idiot died. Oh, nerd kid died. Oh, well. When you don't care about any of your characters, or they don't have anything that makes them fun, then there's no point to even scaring us because we don't feel anything for our characters. At least in Alien, even though Ripley's really the only real memorable character, I at least had some sympathy for the other characters. Like, I liked Parker, I liked Lambert, I liked Ash, kind of. I liked Dallas, I liked Brett. They were okay. I mean, there was nothing wrong with them. They had some fun little quirks and cliques, so when the alien killed them, it did drive up the tension, to the point it was only Ripley left. You need to be able to have well-written characters, and that includes your villains. That cannot just be, oh, scary guy with mask, or family member who went nuts, or little girl who got possessed. That can't just be it. You better make sure that your villains have something to them. Something either we are terrified of or something we can relate to. And now let's get down to the final problem I think with horror films today, franchise mentality. Need I list off the endless sequels, spin-offs, prequels, and an endless supply of horror films franchises that we've gotten as of late? Maybe they had a decent first film that did well at the box office and then they just beat it dry. They milked it. They completely beat it till it was like a animal just spitting out money. They beat it till it couldn't spit out any money anymore. Okay, that may have been a little harsher visual, but you get my point. I mean, look at the Paranormal Activity franchise. I'm not a fan of the first film. In fact, I think it's pretty terrible. I actually really liked the second film more. I thought the second film was great. I think the third film is average. I think the fourth film is awful. Fifth film is terrible. I think they just progressively got worse and worse and worse. Same could go for, say, the Conjuring series, definitely. Same could go for the endless sequels and reboots we've gotten. Like, did you know that there was supposed to be another Friday the 13th reboot in 2018 or 2017? They kept pushing it back till eventually they just canceled it altogether. But then they were going to give us another Friday the 13th reboot because the first one did so well. Great. Then we got a 2011 Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, and that one was terrible. We got a pretty good Halloween reboot in 2018, and now that sequel's coming out, and I hope they don't do the same thing here. I pray to God not. But now we're just getting all of these. We're just getting nothing but spin-offs and cinematic universes. And now I'm going to talk about it. The Conjuring universe has been an absolute failure. I know they keep making their money back, but it's just because, guess what? They're making these movies for cheap. They give them minimal budgets, the effects look terrible, but because it's a crappy horror movie and they always come out in August when nothing else is released, people go see it because they're bored and have nothing else to do with their time. Because it's near the end of summer and school's about to start and they're just looking for stuff to fill the time. So they just go see these horror movies, they have a decent weekend, make a few times their budget back, and then they make another one. And that is another thing that pisses me off. The endless string of low-budget horror films. And they're not low-budget for a reason. Look, Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, say what you want about them, they at least had a reason for their low budgets. They at least had a certain reason to do it. These other horror films, stuff like Apollo 18, The Devil Inside, Chernobyl Diaries, stuff like Curse of La Llorona, stuff like, The Nun. These have no reason to be so low budget. They're just doing that because they know it's an easy way to make money back. Look at Truth or Dare, look at Slender Man, look at Wish Upon. They have no reason to be as cheap as they are. They just know if they put in the bare minimum effort, make it look competent, like it was filmed by a professional, you can tell that, even though most of the camera shots are pretty terrible, especially during the scary scenes. Well, then guess what? Then All they need is a decent weekend, they get their budget back, sequels galore. That is what I hate. Put more effort into your horror films. Go all out on your budgets. Makes the effects look as good as they can. Get really good actors, not just these low-paid people who you can reskin and put in other horror films. Like, seriously, Wish Upon and Truth or Dare, they have the same main lead actress, and she was in another bad horror film, Countdown, just because I guess this is all she can do now, is these really cheap, low-budget horror movies that suck. A lot. I think she was also in The Strangers Play at Night, though I could be wrong on that. Someone correct me if I'm wrong on that. But anyways, that's what these people are doing. They're just taking these low-budget films. They are basically hoping we just need a decent weekend where people go see it 4 or 5 times. Boom, we've made our budget back. We'll make another one. And the sad thing is, they can just keep going. They can make these low-budget films because people still are stupid enough to go see them. People just have nothing better to do with their time. I know something you could do with your time. Buy a cheap horror movie that's older. If you're going to buy a cheap horror movie, buy one of the older ones. Buy like one of the old Halloween films. Like even Halloween 2, that's a decent movie. I'm talking about the one that came after the first Halloween, not the one Rob Zombie made. Buy the other second one. It's actually not that bad. Buy Alien 3, Director's Cut. Director's Cuts for Alien 3 is okay. I have my problems with the real cut, but that's a video for another time. Buy the original Alien, buy Evil Dead, buy Exorcist, buy Texas Chainsaw, buy these horror movies. They actually do what horror films are meant to do. They're not just trying to steal money from your wallet just so they'll inevitably make another crappy spin-off. Last year, look, I have this thing where I give out what I call the Golden Turd Award. I give it out to the worst horror film of the year. And it also turns out I also give it out to the worst film of the year because 2019, the film I thought was the worst was Annabelle Comes Home. Which, by the way, all the Annabelle films, they suck. I know Creation is considered the best one, but even I didn't really like Creation. The Annabelle films, they just all suck. Doll films are just terrible now. And while I'm on it, Brahms, the Boy films, I pray to God they don't make a Boy 3. They hinted at it. I hope to God they don't, because the first 2 were awful. The first one was terrible, and the second one was just abysmal. And that's what I don't want. I don't want us to get endless franchises that are unnecessary and undeserved until the end of time, until inevitably we grow tired of these. Franchises should go out with a bang. Franchises should end on top, with people still admiring how great they are. They shouldn't die out because people got sick of them and stopped going to see them, so they just stopped making them. But unfortunately, I fear that's what's going to happen for a lot of these great horror films, or what could have been great horror franchises. Like The Conjuring 3 is coming out soon. James Wan is not the director. The guy who directed Curse of La Llorona is. And I'm starting to fear that it's going to be the same way. That they're just going to beat the franchise dry, and instead of going out on top, it'll just go out with a whimper. It'll just go out because people got sick of The Conjuring and they moved on to the next big fad. Look, here's my thing. I do not like 2010's horror movies. I think a majority of them were terrible. I liked a few of them, but I will always watch the older horror films over the new ones because the old directors knew what they were doing. Or maybe it's not that the new directors don't know what they're doing, they're just probably following what studio execs told them to do. Again, I sympathize with those directors, I get it, you're just following orders from your execs who are probably giving you like no budget to work with just because it's cheaper for them to sell it that way, but still, they need to put more effort, because the horror film genre can be something spectacular. Not like this. Stop making it cookie cutter garbage, and maybe I will learn to love horror films once again. But until then, I've just kind of stopped being as big a horror fan because I just can't like a majority of the stuff I get. Maybe you guys think differently. Let me know in the comments below what you think of horror films of this past decade, and if you think horror films of the 2020s will be any better. I mean, majority of them might be about coronavirus, which that would probably suck too, because how can you make a virus scary? I mean, I know Contagion was a thing. In fact, maybe you could argue that was a coronavirus movie before the coronavirus. But please don't make coronavirus horror films. That can't be that scary. Unless you make it a zombie film, and, well, that might just come off as insensitive. I don't know. But anyways, let me know what you guys think of the 2020s, what they might be for horror films, and if things are going to get better or worse for the genre. Anyway, that's it from me, guys, and I will see you nerds later.